PFR Nation, it's Kevin Lau, your host of the Planning for Retirement podcast, and welcome to this episode that you've all been waiting for. It is almost November. Today is Halloween, but it's almost November, so you know what that means. Yes, Thanksgiving is around the corner. The holidays are around the corner, but we've got an election coming up, all right? And today I wanted to break down, I've been teasing this for a little while. I wanted to break down Trump versus Harris on their different tax policies and how they might impact you, PFR Nation. So you do not want to miss this one. Don't go anywhere. PFR Nation, let me quickly first address who is PFR Nation, because I've talked about this a little bit, mostly on the YouTube now. Okay, so if you're not following me on YouTube, you need to do that right now, because not only do we post these podcasts, video version every other week, but we're also doing whiteboard fireside chats where I go deeper on a specific topic. And that's been a lot of fun, been really well received. So I appreciate all of your support on that one. But make sure to follow the YouTube. But I've been talking about PFR Nation because at the end of the day, this podcast is not for everybody. In the first couple of years, I just would get on here and just say, hey, everyone, it's Kevin Lau here. I'm not talking to everyone. I'm talking to you, PFR Nation. So let's define PFR Nation. Generally speaking, you guys are between the ages of 50, you guys and gals, you guys are between the ages of 50 to 60, plus or minus 5-ish years. You know, we've got some folks that are in their young to mid 40s for sure, and then mid 60s, no question. But you guys are not underachievers here. You guys are sort of the overachievers. You guys have typically saved already over 7 figures. Some of you are approaching 8 figures in terms of investable assets. And now you're in this position where you're like, I want to make work optional. I want to be in this position where I can fire my boss at any point in time, knowing I have a sound foundation for retirement, and I want to go travel the world. I want to go play more golf. I want to spend time with my grandkids, or just literally do nothing for a while, okay, because you were burnt out from a 30-year career, okay? So this is for you, okay? And so I just wanted to clarify that, because I had a couple of people comment on the YouTube channel just about maybe some confusion about who this podcast is for. Now, if you're not in that sweet spot, you could probably still learn some things. If you're 42 years old, you've just started saving for retirement, maybe you've got a couple $100,000 saved, you could probably learn some things, no question. If you are 65 approaching retirement and you have $600,000 saved, absolutely, you could probably learn some things for this podcast. But I just wanted to clarify who PFR Nation is, and I appreciate all of you who have been listening and following and supporting the show, and that keeps it fun and entertaining for me. So, all right, this topic, listen, I've been preparing for this topic for about a month. It's been a little bit exhausting, I'm not going to lie. And to top it all off, this is my third attempt at recording this this week. Earlier in the week, I was right about to hit the record button. My wife texted me. She said her car battery died, so I needed to pick up the kids that day. So I did that. So I couldn't record that day. The second time, which was yesterday, my microphone just is acting up. I think it might have to do with my new laptop and just not syncing properly with the new laptop. And so I recorded the entire thing. I felt pretty good about it. I was actually pretty excited about it. Sent it over to my editor, and he was just making comments about the audio. And I just figured, okay, my microphone is magically working now. So why don't I give this one final shot? So third time's a charm. So listen, here's the format today. We're not going to get political in terms of I like this candidate or I don't like this candidate. Okay, that's not what I'm going to do. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each topic. All right, I'm going to talk about each tax topic, and I'm going to talk about Trump's policies, and I'm going to talk about Harris's policies. And that's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say former President Donald Trump, or I'm not going to say the Donald. I'm not going to call her Kamala Harris or Vice President. I'm just going to say, to keep it real simple, Trump, Harris, and I'm going to break down each of their policy proposals for each category. And I'm going to go through those categories in just a second. Once I do that, then I will sort of circle back and tie it up in terms of how that might impact you, PFR Nation. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have some fun with this. There's a lot of notes in front of me, a lot of things that I want to make sure I get in here, but it's going to be impossible because I know what's going to happen is I'm going to start flowing on a certain topic. I'm going to go down some rabbit holes and probably not going to get to everything, but hopefully we do. And I also recognize we are just scratching the surface on this thing. This isn't every single tax policy that each candidate has. They have detailed tax policies, generally speaking, on each of their campaign websites that you can go and check out. But 99% of my research was done on the taxfoundation.org's website. Okay, I believe them to be nonpartisan. They put out great content, great information, and they've been following this thing for months now, especially when Harris took over the candidacy for the Democrats. So, all right, so we're going to do this. So what are the topics we're going to go down today? Let me pull these up. All right. So here are the topics. We have business taxes or corporate taxes. We have capital gains and dividends. We have credits, deductions, and exemptions. We've got estate and wealth taxes, individual income taxes, a little bit on Social Security and Medicare, and of course, tariffs and trade. So those are the topics. And we're going to go down just one by one and knock them out. And I'm going to talk about each candidate's proposals. And also recognizing that this is just for fun. 90% of these proposals or discussions around different tax policies probably not going to come to fruition, because that's what the balance of power does. One candidate, just because they win, they can't just come in there and clean house. Even though Trump was trying to do that in 2016, drain the swamp and come in there, he did make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act happen, which was a big deal, a very big deal. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But I just say that because this is kind of more for fun. This shouldn't be, swaying your vote per se. But listen, it's election time, and why not? All right, I don't care. And also, by the way, this isn't really an endorsement for either candidate. I'm not saying, I'm going to vote for a candidate just because of their tax policy. There's more to a candidate than just taxes. But I also recognize taxes are a very big deal in terms of how they impact you, PFR Nation, and how they impact businesses in the U.S., impact individuals in the U.S., impact families in the U.S. So, all right, so let me shut up. Without further ado, why don't we dive in? Business and corporate taxes. All right, this is really the core of things that are to come here. All right, this is foreshadowing. So business taxes, essentially how corporations are taxed. Okay. And we talked a little bit about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We've talked about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act for years now. But one of the major policies in there for Trump back in 2017, when this was implemented, was to lower the corporate income tax rate. And at the time when he got into office, the corporate income tax rate was 35%. He cut that to 21%. Okay. And what he wants to do when he gets into office, if he gets into office, is to cut the corporate tax rate from 21% at the current level down to 20%. So not a huge needle mover there. But the big one is he wants to reduce corporate income taxes for manufacturing companies. So companies that are producing goods in the United States all the way down to 15%. That's really, really significant. Okay. So that's Trump. On Harris's side, she wants to raise the corporate income tax. Okay. So she wants to increase corporate income taxes currently at 21% up to 28%. She wants to do some clawbacks on some deductions for real estate investors. So if you invest in real estate, that's relevant to know. But she's kind of going more the angle on small businesses. Okay. So what she wants to do is right now, if you start a business, you have expenses pre-launch. Okay. These are called startup costs. And right now there's a limit in terms of how much you can deduct on a yearly basis. It's $5,000. And so if you have $10,000 of startup costs, you can only deduct $5,000 in that first year that you started that business, but you can carry those forward up to 15 years. All right. So it's not like those deductions are lost per se, but what Harris wants to do is she wants to increase that first year deduction all the way up to $50,000. All right. And so ultimately what she's trying to position is kind of stimulate the small business activity, try to get startups to kind of get into the mix. And ultimately, I believe her angle here is to try to combat inflation this way. And ultimately, kind of the thinking there is more competition, more small business, stimulating the economy with the small business side, creating more competition, and hopefully bringing prices down for goods and services. So that's really her angle, is kind of stimulating that small business growth. But the increase in corporate taxes versus the lower corporate taxes, I believe this is the bigger needle mover. Okay. The Tax Foundation kind of almost dismissed that increase of the startup deductions from 5 to 50. The reason being is because those businesses can still spread those deductions out for 15 years. So it's not like that's lost. So how many more businesses are just going to start a business? How many more people are just going to start a business just because they can deduct 50 versus 5? I know that was not my mindset when I started my company. I wasn't like, hey, how much can I deduct for startup costs? I'm like, how am I going to feed my family? Okay. So I don't know how much that's going to work, but that's her angle there. I think the big one is this corporate income tax rate. Okay. So lowering the corporate income tax rate, this is just my opinion, more revenue in the business's hands, the corporation's hands, less revenue in the federal government's hands. I believe that's a good thing. Okay. I'm from Washington, D.C. Okay. I know what goes on in Washington, D.C. All right. So I understand corporate bureaucracy, and the federal government is the largest corporate bureaucracy in the world. Okay. And I just believe that they are less efficient than the private sector. That's just my take on that. You can disagree if you want. So I'd much rather have corporate income taxes go down because ultimately that's going to bring jobs back to the US or keep companies here in the US. Prior to 2017, we had companies leaving in droves to go to different countries just to operate with lower income tax rates because 35% was one of the highest corporate income tax rates in the developed world. Now that's down to 21, looking to further cut that to 20 and then cut manufacturing tax rates to 15. I believe that will stimulate the economy, and ultimately Trump's trying to combat inflation that way. Reduce costs of goods that are produced in the US, which ultimately would trickle down to the consumer as well. So that's my lean on that is I love the idea of lower corporate income taxes. I don't want to raise corporate income taxes because then you're going to have the same problem that we had prior to 2017, which is companies just leaving the US producing goods overseas because it's less expensive to operate. Okay. And in my perspective, like I said, if the federal government was good at managing money, I might feel differently about that. But the evidence shows that they're not very good at managing money. Okay. And so but those are the two policies there for Trump and Harris on the business taxes. All right, let's move on to capital gains. So, one of the studies that I pulled on this front was from the Economic Policy Institute, okay? And essentially it looked at the data of wage growth because ultimately the trickle-down effect of lower corporate income taxes is if companies have lower taxes, then they can invest more in research and development. They can pay their workers a fair wage. They can actually potentially grow and hire more workers in general. And so it stimulates growth that way. Higher taxes, there's just less money to go around. They're not going to increase wages at a higher rate. There's less money to invest in research and development. Things like artificial intelligence. Look at how that's taken off over the last few years because of how low interest rates have been, because of how low the corporate income tax has been. Businesses have had money to invest in their corporation, and that helps the consumer in the form of increased wages. So from 2007 to 2024, I looked at a study year by year in terms of wage growth. And I just did a quick little calculation on this. The average wage growth from 2007 to 2024 was about 3.08% annually. Okay. But prior to the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from March of 2007 to December of 2017, the wage growth was 2.39%. So it was below that 17-year average. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went into effect, so beginning in January of 2018 through present, average wage growth has been 4.21%. Okay, so that kind of tells me the story right there is that when corporations have lower taxes, wage growth increases. So we benefit, the working class benefits from that. And when wages are growing, people have more money to save. They have more money to invest, and that stimulates the economy. And that trickles down into the stock market, into earnings of these corporations. And that helps your 401ks, that helps your IRAs, that helps your taxable brokerage accounts. Okay. So that to me, that study tells it all from a statistical point of view that lower corporate income taxes have stimulated wage growth, which is a positive for the US economy. That's what we need. We need wages to grow. Housing is not affordable at this point in time. It's very tough to raise a family on a single income these days, like it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s when I was growing up. Okay. It just is not the same. All right. I'm very fortunate in that regard that, my wife can stay home and be with our kids. She doesn't have to go to work. She does work a little bit, but she doesn't have to. And that's very, very difficult in this modern economy. All right. And so I think wage growth, it will trickle down and it create a positive impact on the United States workforce. All right. So let's transition to capital gains and dividends. All right. And so this is a big one, right? I mean, if you invest in a security, if you invest in assets, I'm talking about assets outside of your traditional 401ks, your IRAs, your brokerage accounts, or HSAs, because those have their own tax preferential treatment. But when you invest in, let's say, a stock, a bond, or a mutual fund inside of, let's say, a brokerage account, and you sell that investment and it grows over time and you sell that investment for a gain, now you have a realized capital gain. All right. And so right now there are three tax rates on capital gains. There's 0% based upon how your income level is. There's 0%, 15%, and 20%. Okay. And so Trump's policy, very simple. Keep it the same. No changes there. Harris's policy, she does want to increase capital gains, the top rate up to 28%. So raise it from 20 up to 28%. This is for income for those that are earning income in excess of $1 million. There's also what's known as the Medicare surtax, okay, which is also stands for the net investment income tax. Currently, that's 3.8%. So if you earn above a certain income level, you not only have that 20%, but you also have a 3.8% excess tax for Medicare surcharges. And she wants to increase that to 5%. So technically speaking, if you're at that top tier of income, your capital gains bracket is going to be increased from 28 up to 33%. Okay, so pretty substantial on this front. And, sort of kind of my take on this one is that many people get really worked up about elections. And in my opinion, the reason is because there's so much uncertainty after the election. So markets in general really like certainty. Okay. They don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty causes people to panic or speculate, and that creates a lot of volatility in the stock market. Certainty, people are kind of status quo. We're good. We know what's coming. We know what to expect. So less volatility. Now, obviously, with volatility comes opportunity. But for you, PFR Nation, you're probably at that mode where you're approaching retirement. You don't want your portfolio to drop 30 to 40%. Okay. And I believe increasing taxes to that level on capital gains could create some uncertainty for the stock market, because it's just people are going to be less incentivized to invest in securities outside of their 401k plans. Sure, they might still max their 401k or Roth accounts or do the mega after tax backdoor Roth conversion. Such a mouthful. So they'll probably still do those things. But beyond that, they're going to be disincentivized to invest long term. Same thing with real estate. One of the biggest benefits of investing in these types of assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, is that when you die, then your children will get a step up in cost basis. So if they go and sell, their sale price subtracted by the value at your death is going to be the realized gain or realized loss potentially. Whereas if you sold it during your lifetime, you're going to have to pay a realized gain on that one. So a big benefit to investing long-term in these types of securities outside of the traditional retirement vehicles are the step up in cost basis. And so again, you sort of look at this idea of raising tax rates, raising capital gains taxes, raising the Medicare surcharges. And then the last proposal that I haven't mentioned yet is potentially taxing unrealized capital gains. So not even just realized capital gains, but Harris and Biden have talked about taxing unrealized capital gains. Now it's very small. It's for a small subset of individuals. Okay. Most of you PFR Nation it's not going to affect you directly, but it could indirectly. Okay. So ultimately the proposal, what's discussed is taxing unrealized capital gains at 20% for net wealth in excess of $100 million. So if someone has a net wealth of over 100 million, let's say you own a business and some real estate and some, stocks and 401ks, et cetera, and your excess of 100 million, the proposal, and again, I don't know logistically how this is going to work. First of all, I don't think this is going to go through, period. Okay. This is just way too progressive, but I don't think it's going to go forward, period. But ultimately, if you have a net wealth, now how that differs from net worth, I'm not 100% sure, but a net wealth of over 100 million, they will begin to tax your unrealized gains at 20%. So as an example, let's say you bought an asset for $1 million that has grown to $10 million. So you have a $9 million gain. Right now, if you don't sell that asset, you're not being taxed on that asset. Okay. Of course, if it's spinning off income or dividends, you'll have some taxes on that income, but you're not going to pay tax on the gain until you sell it. So this policy would essentially tax that $9 million at 20%, whether you sell it or not. So again, it's going to disincentivize wealthy individuals from investing long term, which absolutely will have a trickle effect on these corporate earnings, because fewer dollars flowing into these organizations for them to invest is fewer dollars for them to invest in research and development, new technology, hiring people, increasing wages. So I believe that will hurt the stock market. But again, that ain't going to happen. So that's one of those just hypotheticals, fun to talk about, but probably not really going to impact you, PFR Nation, at the end of the day. Okay, we're going to now transition to tax credits, tax deductions, and tax exemptions. Okay, so very simply put, we've got Trump on one side. He wants to make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. So that kind of transitions a little bit into the individual taxes. So we'll talk about that. But the big thing there, the permanent Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2016, when this went into effect in 2017, it doubled the standard deduction. Okay. So as a taxpayer, you can either itemize your deductions or you can take the standard deduction. So if you itemize, you're adding up your property taxes, you're adding up your charitable donations, you're adding up your mortgage insurance. And so you're adding all of these deductions up and you're going to see, okay, how much does that equal? Okay. And so So if that number doesn't exceed the standard deduction, the one that the IRS just gives you automatically, regardless of what your other deductions are, if it doesn't exceed the standard, you're going to take the standard deduction. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act essentially doubled the standard deduction for everybody. And so that was a big deal. So not only did tax rates go down, but the standard deduction was doubled. And so ultimately, Trump wants to make that permanent. He also wants to increase the universal tax credit for children. Okay, so tax credit, different than a tax deduction. A tax deduction reduces your taxable income dollar for dollar. A tax credit reduces your taxes owed dollar for dollar. So it's more powerful, a tax credit. Right now, it's $2,000 per child. And ultimately, Trump and Vance they're looking to increase that to $5,000. Okay. And then the last part about this is they are looking to reinstate the unlimited itemized deductions for SALT, or state and local taxes. Right now, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that was one policy that was a little bit surprising to some, is that they capped the SALT deduction at $10,000. So for those of you that are in a low income tax state or a low property tax state, it probably helped you because you weren't really deducting very much anyways. Maybe you weren't even deducting $10,000 for itemized, but now your standard deduction doubles. So you're probably like, heck yeah, this is great. For those of you that are in California or New York or just high state income tax states, high property tax states, this probably net hurts you a little bit. You probably transitioned over to a standard deduction because most taxpayers are doing the standard deduction now, but they're looking to reinstate unlimited itemized SALT deductions, which I think is a really big deal. So it's basically keeping Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in effect and increasing or uncapping the SALT deduction, which is currently capped at $10,000. Harris, on the other side, she is looking to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This was really interesting on this one. So she is looking to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act for those households that are making less than $400,000 of household income. So she's kind of taking a different spin on this and saying, okay, we're going to keep it for those making under 400, but we're going to tax the wealthy, tax the rich. So that's sort of their mantra, if you will. In addition to that, they would like to increase the child tax credit, but they're going to do it in sort of a phase system, or they'd like to do it in a phase system where if the child is under 1 year old, you have a $6,000 child credit. So right now, again, it's $2,000, and they're looking to increase that to $6,000. If you're following on the video, I was putting fingers up and I put up 4 for some reason. Anyway, so $6,000 if you're under 1, $3,600 for ages 2 to 5, and then $3,000 for children above the age of 5. So a little bit of complexity there. Not really sure the rationale. I mean, to be truthful, my perspective is on this. My kids are more expensive now than they were when they were under 1 year old. Okay, my kids are between the ages of 3 to 5. They eat like monsters. Now, granted, they're loud boys, and I eat a lot of food, even still to this day. But when I was a kid, I would clean house. I mean, I used to have eating competitions with my cousin, who's like, I think 13 or 14 years older than me. And so like, I get it, newborn, it's very expensive. You might have to stay home from work. So I maybe that's the angle is, parents have to maybe stay home or take some extra time off, or maybe you have some medical bills early on. But kind of from my perspective, in terms of how expensive my kids are, they're getting more expensive each year. Okay. So it doesn't get less expensive. It actually, at my perspective, it gets more expensive. And talking to my friends and family members that have kids that are, let's say, 12, 13, 14, 15, activities, the sports, the travel, it gets out of control. So I don't know. But ultimately, both parties are looking to increase these child tax credits across the board. What I'd also throw out there is Harris is looking to have a $25,000 down payment assistance via a tax credit for first-time home buyers. And I think they would spread that out over 4 years is what I read on this one. And I think there might be like an additional incentive for if you're a first generation home buyer, meaning like your parents didn't own a home in the US and you were the first generation to own a home. So some interesting proposals here. I think on Trump's side, like I said, if you are in one of those high income tax states, high property tax states, you're probably going to love the uncapped SALT deduction. I think just about everyone is going to like the idea of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act being extended. I'm just telling you. And I truly believe that whoever wins, I believe it's going to be extended. Now, if Harris wins, she wants to extend it just for folks making under 400. So for those of you that are making over 400 as a household, you're probably going to have an increased tax bill. Okay. So you're going to need to do some planning, from that perspective and think through, okay, what's my bracket now? What might it be when I retire? Because maybe you switch over to some more pre-tax contributions in the 401k at this point in time, if those tax brackets go up. Because even if you look sort of at the tax brackets in general, the percentages, the 22% bracket would then become 25. And then the 24% bracket currently would become 28. So you can just kind of see right then and there, that sweet spot for the PFR Nation, you're going to have an increase in the percentage right away. And like I said, I mean, we'll see ultimately what happens. Like I said, a lot of these are proposals. A lot of these are hypotheticals. I think the increased child tax credits have a little bit of a challenge with this one because in general, I feel like, okay, for you PFR Nation and your children, probably not going to really impact them too much. But for lower educated families and low income families, like families at the poverty line, they were going to look at the $6,000 and $5,000 and be like, that could be an incentive for them just to have children just to get that tax credit. So I'm a little bit concerned about that and sort of like, what are we incentivizing? And just making sure the dollars are being spent wisely. It's very tough to manage, very tough to do. But certainly I'm all for putting more money in the hands of families that need help, that need it the most, that need the support. So I think, it seems like both parties are on board with increasing the child tax credit. It just depends on to what level, and if you do it in the phase system, the under one, the age 2 to 5, 3, 3K, et cetera, for older kids. The down payment assistance, for this one, I kind of struggle with this one as well. I mean, I get it. Houses are extremely expensive and we have an affordable housing crisis in the US, no question. Okay. It's very difficult to afford a home in today's economy. But, here's the thing, why are homes so expensive? I mean, you look at the cost of lumber, you look at the cost of aluminum and steel, that rate shot up significantly after the pandemic. Lumber has come down a good bit. So that's helped a little bit, but ultimately prices to build homes are still insane. I was getting some quotes on this one because we are shopping for a new house here in Tennessee and we're looking at, hey, do we buy an existing? Do we build? And building a home, price per square foot is significantly more than buying an existing home that is actually move-in ready. So just new builds are very, very expensive. And I was looking back on the Hoover Institute of Research. I'm going to post this in the show notes. And this article really hit home, I believe, or it was really kind of telling the story of why this is happening, is manufactured homes were a significant percentage of single-family homes prior to 1974. In fact, it was 1 out of every 3 homes in America were manufactured homes. Basically, these are homes that were produced in masses and shipped to a property site to connect to utilities, foundations, et cetera. And again, 33% of homes in the US were manufactured homes. Today, it's 10%, 1 in every 10. And the reason is because Congress in 1974 basically passed some bill and required manufactured homes to be permanently attached to a rolling trailer. Again, this is sort of this idea of bureaucrats getting in the way of private industries and screwing things up. Okay. And so again, I'm not just saying specifically that is why homes are so expensive today, but we need to find a way to build less expensive homes for the people that need it, not necessarily just give them 25 grand. It's just, for me, it's like, hey, where was the $25,000 what if you bought a home last year? You scrapped and clawed for the last decade. Let's say you have kids that are in their 20s. Let's say they scrapped and clawed during college, saved a little bit of money, and then they worked for a few years in their 20s, and now, boom, now they have their own down payment. They just bought a house, and now they can't qualify for that. And so just for me, it's like, I understand these things you can't retroactively apply, but I just feel like for me, I don't know, I'm not about giving away free money. That's just my 2 cents on that one. All right, let's transition over to estate and wealth taxes. All right. And so for those of you that don't know, if you pass away in 2024, by the way, and your taxable estate is over $13.61 million as an individual or $27.22 million as a married couple, you might owe some federal estate taxes. Now, there are lower thresholds depending on what state you live in. I believe there are 13 different states that have a state estate tax. And essentially, you can also kind of think of this as a death tax. So you pass away, you have some assets that are potentially valuable. And if your taxable estate is below the threshold, again, it's 13.61 million today, or 27.22 if you're married. If your taxable estate's below that amount, your family is not going to owe any federal estate taxes. They might owe state estate taxes, but let's talk about the federal level. So the reason this is so high is because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Again, going back to 2017. And prior to 2017, it was actually $5.5 million per person. So it actually doubled in 2018 when the law went into effect. So again, $11 million, multiply that by 2, that's $22 million back in 2018. So back prior to then, we had a lot of taxable estates. In fact, I'm looking at the stats here. In 2001, nearly 52,000 estates owed estate taxes, okay, about in the amount of about $23.5 billion. So people that passed away that year, 52,000 people that passed away in 2001 had taxable estates, and the federal government collected $23.5 billion in tax revenue. Whereas 20 years later, 2021, so now we're well into the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there were only 1,300 taxable estates. So significantly lower. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, if you double the estate exemption, you're going to have fewer people that have taxable estates, and the tax revenue collected was $9.3 billion. So ultimately, what is proposed right now, what's on the docket is, again, Trump is looking to make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. So keeping that the same. So basically kind of keeping the federal government out of the pockets of these taxable estates. Harris, on the other hand, has endorsed reducing the taxable estate. Okay. And I believe the level that I'm looking at, it looks like she would like it to be reduced down to $3.5 million per person, and then potentially increase the top federal estate tax rate, which is currently at 40%. It is a tiered system. The top rate is 40%. She is looking to increase that up to 65%. Okay. In addition to that, right now, there's an annual gifting amount. Okay. So one of the things, if you're above the estate tax exemption that you might consider, is you might consider lifetime giving. So you have beneficiaries, let's say they're adult children, and they're going to receive your money anyway. So you're going to just, instead of leaving the assets at death and then having a substantial taxable estate, maybe in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you take advantage of the annual gift exclusion, which right now is $18,000 per donor per recipient. So if you have two children, you can donate $18,000 to each of them for a total of $36,000. If you're married and have two children, each of you can donate $18,000 to your child. So you can donate $36,000 to child number one as a couple, and then $36,000 to child number two as a couple. So that's $72,000 you can give to your beneficiaries without having to file a gift tax return. Okay. So pretty powerful. So over time, what you can do is you can essentially give away your taxable estate, reduce that taxable estate over time, get it in the hands, get that growth and appreciation in the hands of your recipients, your beneficiaries that are ultimately going to inherit those assets anyways, and then try to, again, reduce that taxable estate. Very popular strategy among PFR Nation. Okay. Harris, they are looking to cap the annual giving per donor at $10,000 and also capping it at $20,000 total per year. So even if you have multiple children, it's going to be a $20,000 cap total. So sort of two things: reducing the federal exemption to $3.5 million and then reducing the annual giving cap. So essentially, she wants to increase the revenue received from federal estate taxes or death taxes. Okay. To be truthful, I'm not 100% sure of the impact on the stock market. I'm not sure if that really has a significant impact on the stock market or the bond market in terms of valuations of your portfolios. But certainly from a financial planning and estate planning perspective, it will impact a lot of you in PFR Nation. If the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is sunsets or expires, and now this new federal exemption comes in at $3.5 million, many of you are already above that threshold, and you're only in your 50s or early 60s. And so you're still going to have another 10, 15, 20 years of compounding. Now, of course, the laws can change. These change all the time. So you can't just make a ton of moves just for this potential hypothetical. Wait until it actually becomes law if it does change. And that's for all of this. All of these are hypotheticals. But if it does change, annual giving is going to be a lot more popular, okay, for all of you individuals that are in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. So trying to kind of reduce your taxable estate by getting that appreciation out of your estate, potentially doing some trust planning, maybe using some irrevocable trust or potentially life insurance trust, irrevocable life insurance trust, to sort of help your beneficiaries pay those estate taxes, especially if you're a business owner, own some real estate or stocks that are very, very valuable. You want your beneficiaries to preserve those assets, not have to go through a fire sale just to pay the estate taxes due, which can be substantial. And I've talked about this before on a previous episode around reasons to own permanent life insurance. This is one of those reasons. And right now the exemption is so high, so it's not concerning for a lot of you in PFR Nation. Some of you absolutely, but a lot of you are under the federal exemption. But if this goes to 3.5 million or something much lower than it is today, many of you are going to be subject to estate taxes, and you're going to need to talk to your attorneys, get with them, come up with a plan, and then coordinate with your financial planner who understands tax, understands retirement planning, and your specific retirement goals to sort of coordinate that whole plan. But those are really the biggies there. on the estate and wealth taxes. All right, let's transition over to individual income taxes. I think really it's a lot more of the same on this front. Again, make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, which again, 62% of taxpayers will see an increase in taxes if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act does not get extended. Okay, so I mean, just let's call a spade a spade. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act reduced taxes for the majority of Americans. Okay, not just the wealthy, the majority of Americans. Okay, actually, the lower income people benefited even more. And obviously, Harris recognizes this. And that's why in her proposal, she would like to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act for those making under 400. For me, I have a little bit of problem with that just because if you're making 400 in, let's say, San Francisco, that probably feels like you're making like $200,000 in, I don't know, let's call it New Mexico. I don't know. Actually, I don't even know if the cost of living is in New Mexico, but a state that is much lower cost of living, let's say it's Ohio or Michigan. I mean, very different. So it's hard to just say everyone in America, if you're making 400, you're now wealthy. I mean, obviously 400 is a great income, a great household income, probably regardless of where you live. If you can't live on 400, I don't care if you're at San Francisco or somewhere else, probably have a problem there. But again, it's very different making 400 in some of those really, really high income or high cost of living cities or states versus some of the lower costs. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think Harris recognizes it has benefited those lower middle income, upper middle income households and looking to extend that. So that's a big deal. But another, couple of things that are really interesting, really for both of these candidates, is that Trump and Harris, I believe, what I'm reading is both of them want to exempt tips from taxable income. This is a really interesting one. I've actually thought about doing an episode specifically on tipping, just because I feel like it's just gotten so out of hand. I think we could all agree on that. And listen, I worked for tips the majority of my like childhood growing up. Like when I was my first job I was 11 years old. I was a soccer referee. I was a big soccer player growing up. So I was a soccer referee on the weekends. I ref 6-7 games and I was making like $15 a game or something like that. But it was great money at the time and it was a lot of fun. It was a way for me to sort of learn responsibility, showing up on time, et cetera. And also getting yelled at by parents that think their kid's going to be the next Pele. My next job was working at a country club, international country club in Fairfax, Virginia, Chantilly, Virginia. And 99% of my wages were tips. And then in college, I worked at 2 different country clubs to make some side hustle, to help pay for things in school. 99% of my income was from tips. So for me at the time, I would have been, absolutely, this is great. I'm not being taxed on tips. But I feel like for what they're trying to do is help lower income individuals. But a lot of these individuals don't even pay taxes anyways because they make so little. I mean, a lot of these are college students or folks in their 20s. And so a lot of them are not even really making a lot of money in general. And so because of the standard deduction and how high it is, a lot of them don't even have any federal income taxes due at all. Okay. I had this stat pulled up somewhere. Let me look at this. Oh yeah, look at this. 37% of tipped workers earn so little they pay no federal income taxes. Okay. And so the Brookings Institute looked at this whole no tax on tips idea. And basically they came to the conclusion that only 5% of workers could actually benefit from this. And I also feel like this could also hurt them because then they're not paying into Social Security. They're not paying into Medicare, okay, which is a whole nother story. There's a lot of challenges around Social Security shoring up that deficit and shortfall. But ultimately, they're not going to be paying into Social Security, Medicare. So what are they going to rely on when they're in their 60s and 70s if they don't have any Social Security? Okay, so in addition to that, I have a challenge with this because now you've got, let's say, the same wage earner. Let's say a bartender is making $50,000 a year, okay, roughly. And let's say you have a teacher that's earning $50,000 a year. Now you're saying, okay, you know what? We're going to tax the bartender less and we're going to tax the teacher more. For me, I have a little bit of a problem with that. And so I don't know if I'm a fan of this, maybe because I'm soured on tipping. Again, I worked for tips for a long time, but it's just gotten out of control. I get a to-go Starbucks and they flip around the iPad. I'm like, yeah, I will give you $1, $2, fine. But if I just got a coffee that was $4, now you tack on another $1, that's a 25% increase. You talk about inflation. That's inflation right there, is this whole tipping problem. And then I also feel like then employers are going to abuse this, is they're going to say, hey, a majority of your wages are now tips. We're going to pay you less out of pocket. Now us, the consumer, we're going to be responsible for those payments. And now it's tax free. And it's going to just really incentivize a lot of shady behavior, both from those small business owners and even from employees. I don't know how I feel about the tipping deal, but I do feel like we need to do something for these lower income individuals, or more the teachers, the first responders, the police officers, our military? How are we benefiting them? Okay. The no tipping, in my opinion, doesn't really help the people that really need the help. So don't really love that idea. But both, for some reason, Harris and Trump, they're both in favor of that. But the one thing that was really interesting on the Trump side, to sort of round out the income tax piece, is Trump is looking to exempt Social Security from income taxes. So I just mentioned when you earn wages, you pay into Social Security and you pay into Medicare. Okay. And right now, Social Security taxes are capped. Once you earn over 168,000 and some change in 2024, you stop paying into Social Security. So just to kind of really quickly talk about the deficit and the shortfall with Social Security, a lot of people think, okay, in 10 years, Social Security is going bankrupt, which is partially true. Essentially, the trust fund is depleted, but 80% of benefits are funded by current taxpayer dollars. Okay. So people that are working are paying for the benefits of the folks that are not working, that are on Social Security, that are on Medicare. 80% of those benefits are funded from current workers. So I feel like they're going to probably increase that Social Security tax wage base going up from 168, probably increase that a fair amount, maybe up to 200 to 210. So a lot of people will have an increase in taxes, especially in that middle income tier and certainly the higher income tier. But yeah, Trump is looking to exempt Social Security income from taxes. So right now, how it works, when you collect Social Security, up to 85% of that income could be included in your taxable income. So it doesn't mean you pay a tax rate of 85%. It just means you have to include potentially up to 85% in your taxable income. So Trump is looking to basically eliminate that from taxable income, exempt that from taxable income. So I think that's very interesting. Not really sure how that's going to kind of shore up the deficit with Social Security funding, with Medicare funding. But a lot of you for PFR Nation probably would be in favor of that. If you're collecting a benefit, let's say of $3,000 a month or $3,500 a month, and right now up to 85% of that could be included in taxes versus in the future, it could be 0% included in taxes. That's a pretty big deal. Okay. I need to see how expensive that's going to be. Unfortunately, I couldn't really find that information on the Tax Foundation's website or anywhere else. But that would be my concern, is how expensive would that proposal be to actually implement. But I all of you PFR Nation that are about to get on Social Security, you're probably like, yes, let's make that happen. All right. Let's see what else. Anything else with Social Security and Medicare? Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing with Social Security and Medicare in addition is just finding out a way to sort of protect against the shortfall that's coming. Right now, like I said, if nothing else changes from now until 2033-ish, 2034 for both Social Security and Medicare, those trust funds are depleted. And right now, the trust funds are being used to shore up the gap. Like I said, 80% of benefits are funded by taxpayer dollars. And so one way you can increase the revenue generated is increasing the wage base on Social Security, increase taxes on Medicare. So people that are working will pay higher taxes to fund those benefits. Another way you could do it is cut benefits. Another way you could do it is change the formula in terms of what full retirement age is, what the latest retirement age is, what the earliest retirement age is. All of those things are sort of levers they can pull, or raise taxes from some other way, or have wages increase. Find a way to stimulate the economy so wages grow significantly, and therefore more dollars are being taxed to pay into Social Security, to pay into Medicare. I think this is, I believe, what Trump is trying to do with lowering the corporate income tax rate, is to stimulate growth, stimulate the economy, and increase wages over time. Let's talk about tariffs and trade. All right. So tariffs and trade, one of the bigger talked about topics, really over the last several years. We all know Trump's stance on tariffs. He was very hard on tariffs, very hard on China. All right. And yeah, I mean, really the big one there is, having a baseline tariffs of from 10 to 20%, and then have a 60% tariff on all U.S. imports from China. Okay. And also Trump has floated this idea of basically replacing personal income taxes with increased tariffs. I think that's more of a joke than anything else, but he said that. And then on Harris's side, really maintaining the current tariffs on China. It's interesting that, Biden didn't undo any of those tariffs that Trump put into effect. Actually, he kept it intact, and he's actually, they've collected more in tariff revenue than the Trump administration did ever. And so a lot of people, were calling Trump like a racist and anti-China, back in 2018 when he did this. I just thought he was pro-American and is just trying to protect America, because is China our friend? I just don't know at this point in time. It seems like they're creating an environment where they're spying on the U.S. They're doing more of this online warfare against America. And for me, it's just, can we trust countries like China? And I think really that's why Trump put those tariffs in effect is to really discourage companies and Americans from importing goods from China just because of those security concerns, those national security concerns. And Biden recognized this and kept that in place. And in fact, the Tax Foundation website, they actually call them the Trump-Biden tariffs. Okay, not even the Trump tariffs, it's the Trump-Biden tariffs. And so Harris, her policy would be to maintain those tariffs, but also increase tariffs on steel, aluminum, and also green energy and medical goods. So again, trying to stimulate those jobs and sort of those alternative energy types of manufacturing. That makes a ton of sense based on their policies with the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. So yeah, I think ultimately both parties are in favor of tariffs. It seems like Trump is really doubling down on taxing imports in China. The net result, according to the Tax Foundation, according to all the economists that I follow, is that this is an increase in taxes indirectly on U.S. consumers, on you and I. And I don't believe that's the sole reason we've had inflation. Okay. I don't think that's the sole reason we've had inflation over the last few years. It was kind of a perfect storm of the tariffs went into effect that increased prices because now we're not importing as many goods from those countries, or those goods are more expensive now. And those costs are then passed on to you and I. The corporations that are eating the cost, they're not going to just say, oh, you know what, it will impact our profitability. We'll just tell in our quarterly meeting for our board, we'll just tell them, hey, we ate the cost. No. They pass those costs on to you and I. So I think that's part of the reason for inflation. But then part of the reason for inflation has also been record stimulus into the hands of individuals that probably didn't need the stimulus. And of course, we had the COVID shutdown, the global supply shutdown, during the pandemic that impacted the supply chain for several years. Frankly, I think we're still recovering from that. I remember all those container ships just sitting off the port of LA. They couldn't unload because there was no one to unload the goods. So yeah, I think, tariffs in general do have an inflationary effect on consumers. So I think that is an absolute risk. But I believe both parties are kind of looking longer term. You sort of look at the manufacturing tax cuts going down to 15% and sort of incentivizing companies to build things here, making things less expensive to build here in the US, and hopefully over time, reducing those costs and reducing inflation on those goods produced in America. So I think that'll take a lot of time for that to really see, did that actually play out or not? I think in the short term, it's going to result in kind of stickier inflation than I believe Jay Powell wants to have. But ultimately, this is what it is. Biden and Harris, they have not taken away the tariffs. And in fact, they're looking to expand those. Both candidates would look to expand those if they were in office. Oh, all right, PFR Nation. So that was a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for tuning in. And thank you all for just taking this journey with me. I'm no tax policy expert. I'm not a politician. So this is sort of, hey, I believe here are the key data points that are interesting for the PFR Nation folks, for you guys and gals. And so that's what I wanted to try to create an environment just to talk about the two different parties. It would have been easier if I would have just said party A, party B. Maybe that's how I should have done it instead of put the name on it. Because I think anytime you put the name on Trump, especially, there's either a very positive connotation or a very negative connotation associated. For me, I'm just pro-American. Listen, I love America and what this country has done for my family. My dad immigrated from a third world country, Myanmar, came here for college with very little English, not knowing anyone except for my aunt, and then a couple of his cousins and then brothers that ultimately moved here. But, he lived that American dream. He came here legally, worked his way in, got U.S. citizenship, met my mom, had a family, bought a house, lived the American dream. And I'm so grateful for that. I love America so much. And regardless of who wins, regardless of what candidate comes in office, whether it's Trump or Harris, my prayer is that they can unite the country. Okay. They can bring the country together, stop with the divisiveness. Let's come together as a nation. I believe we have a lot more in common than what the media tries to tell us. Okay. The media tries to tell us that we're either conservative or Democrat and, we have to hate the other party. That's BS. Okay. I talk to people that have different beliefs than me all the time. And in fact, regardless of who I vote for, sometimes the candidate that I vote for, there are certain policies I don't disagree with. There are things that I don't agree with. Okay. And vice versa. The candidate that I don't vote for, there are some policies that I'm like, man, I really like that. So I just want to say that I believe we have a lot more in common than what the media says. And I want people to have more open and honest conversations about politics and religion, frankly, because I think these are at its core, what America was founded on, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. I mean, these are things that we should be comfortable talking about, not feeling like we get censored just because you believe something, or, not because you get canceled by your friends, because you believe a certain thing. I just think that's really dangerous, and that's unfortunate where our country's come. In my opinion, I've seen it happen since 2016. That's really where it started. But social media has not helped. Twitter, X, those things have not helped with the divisiveness. So I just pray whatever politicians in office can unite the country, bring us together, and continue the pro-American way. Okay, listen, I'm all about globalization. I'm all about doing business with our allies in other countries, helping other countries out. But we also have to look out for our own people. Okay, we've got a lot of people that are citizens of America that are struggling to make ends meet, that are really, really struggling with a lot of different things. Okay, and I just want to say that let's just be pro-American. Whatever candidate, we love America, and whoever wins, if you didn't vote for that person, still respect that person, because they're holding the highest office in the world. Okay, the leader of the free world is the most powerful position in the world. So, that's kind of my final thoughts on this one. But yeah, listen, I'm not endorsing either candidate, and I'm not trying to sway your vote one way or the other. I just wanted to talk about what the key issues are from a tax perspective, because that does have a trickle down effect to how you plan for retirement, how that impacts the stock market, etc. But that's it for today, everyone. And listen, make sure to follow the YouTube channel. Make sure to give our show a follow. And listen, if you're finding value in our content, make sure to leave a 5-star review. Don't forget about that. Okay. I appreciate all of you who've already left reviews, but if you've been listening for a while and you're like, oh, this is really valuable, this is helpful stuff, leave a 5-star review. It helps us reach more people. Share the podcast with a friend that you think might benefit, or a family member you think might benefit. That would be great. And if you're interested, listen, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, we're happy to take on new clients. Right now, we are not taking on any new clients for the remainder of 2024. We are opening the door for 2025 for the first quarter. We have a couple of slots open. So if you're interested in just kind of seeing what it would be like to work with me one-on-one, fill out that retirement readiness review survey. It's linked in the show notes, and just give us some basic information. You don't have to fill out anything that's personally identifiable information, but just some basic information, and we'll take a look at that, and I will follow up with a personalized Zoom recording on the areas of opportunity that I see for you, and what it would look like if we were to work together on a financial planning and retirement planning engagement. And also with the whiteboard fireside chats and the whiteboard retirement plans. If you're interested in being featured on a whiteboard retirement plan, fill out that same retirement readiness survey, and just make sure to indicate somewhere in there in the notes or the other section that this is for the whiteboard retirement plan breakdown, just because that's the same link for clients that are applying to work with us one-on-one. So I think that's it, everybody. Until next time, PFR Nation, this is Kevin Lau signing off.